Welcome back to GRTS News. After 6 months of fighting between forces loyal to the government in Kinshasa and the notorious M23 rebels, the United Nations Security Council has come down heavily with a report urging Rwanda and Uganda not to fuel the rebellion in the east of the DRC. Meanwhile, senior officials of the M23 have vehemently denied any support whatsoever from its neighbors. Details in this report.
Civilian residents of the North Kivu region have been facing rape, pillaging, and all forms of brutal activity over the past 6 months. The steady violence has been strongly criticized in a report issued by the United Nations that accuses the Congolese M23 rebels of spreading terror in the east of DR Congo. The UN Security Council on Friday called both the Rwandans and their Congolese neighbors to stop helping the M23 rebels.
I reject this entire report, and I continue to make strong calls for an independent investigation. M23 does not even need soldiers nor weapons coming from Rwanda or Uganda.
The M23, now called the Revolutionary Army of Congo, have promised to respond to all attacks by loyalist forces while keeping the door open for peace talks.
We are calling for direct talks with President Kabila as soon as possible to discuss the fundamental problems.
Every attempt by the Congolese army to fight against the M23 rebels has failed. In June, the Congolese army ran out of food and had to retreat from its positions. The Congolese defense minister barely survived a motion to get rid of him proposed by 164 deputies.
Thousands of demonstrators at the funeral of the Lebanese intelligence chief who was recently killed in a car bomb in Beirut demanded the ouster of the Lebanese prime minister while pointing accusing fingers at the Syrian regime for the killing of the intelligence chief, who according to sources was a close friend to the former Lebanese prime minister Rafik Hariri, who was also killed in similar circumstances some 7 years ago.
Thousands of Lebanese accompanied Sunday General Wissam al-Hassan on his last journey. The chief of intelligence at the Internal Security Forces, killed Friday in a car bombing, is to be buried in the same mausoleum as his friend and mentor Rafik Hariri, the former prime minister assassinated in similar circumstances 7 years ago. Prime Minister Najib Mikati, who is at the head of a government infiltrated by the Hezbollah and close to Damascus and Tehran, presented his resignation to President Suleiman, who asked him to stay on.
His Excellency the President said we should look into the matter in terms of national interest, to safeguard Lebanon from entering into a void and going into the unknown. He said that things should be considered calmly to see how the situation unfolds.
The Lebanese turned the funeral ceremony into a massive demonstration against the Syrian regime blamed since 2005 for the attacks that have been targeting political leaders who resist Damascus. Lebanese police used tear gas on Sunday to repel demonstrators trying to storm the Serai, the headquarters of Prime Minister Najib Mikati, amid calls for him to resign. This new development, in which the Syrian crisis is sliding into Lebanon, comes at a time when Bashar al-Assad is under increasing pressure. Engaged in the violent repression of insurgents in his own country, the Syrian president received the UN and Arab League special envoy on Sunday, who is urging both sides to implement a ceasefire for Al-Hatta holiday next weekend. The same day, the Syrian capital was shaken by an attack in the Christian neighborhood of Bab Tuma. The explosion, which killed at least 10 people, seems to be signaling that the possibility of a ceasefire is quickly slipping away.
At least 200 people were evacuated from the city of Tokyo on Sunday, and the Israeli Navy has seized a pro-Palestinian activist ship, the Estelle, in international waters at the coast of Gaza early Saturday morning, rerouted and shipped to the Israeli port nearby. We have details of these and other stories in this roundup.
The Israeli Navy seized the pro-Palestinian activist ship the Estelle in international waters off the coast of Gaza early Saturday morning and rerouted the three-mast schooner to the Israeli port of Ashdod nearby. There were no reports of injuries among the 30 activists on board the schooner from Europe, Canada, and Israel, including 5 European deputies and 3 Israeli peace activists. The ship was carrying cargo including cement for construction and children's school books and medical supplies. Tens of thousands of people demonstrated in the streets of London and other major cities in Great Britain to say no to establishing closer ties with the European Union. This is the policy of the right-of-centre government of Prime Minister David Cameron. The leader of the opposition Labour Party, Ed Miliband, accused Cameron of making budget cuts that are too large. Hundreds of Christian pilgrims had an unusual vacation at the well-known site of Lourdes. On Saturday, some 450 people had to leave the site in southwest France. Heavy rains in the region caused rivers there to overflow. Firemen used helicopters to evacuate sick people and the elderly. Religious sanctuaries were inundated. Water levels began to drop on Sunday. At least 200 people were evacuated from the city of Tokyo on Sunday. A bomb was found in a district currently being constructed. Japanese security forces were able to disarm the bomb. Local experts said that the bomb was probably an American incendiary device dating from the Second World War.
Well, from that we take a look at sports. Bundesliga leaders Bayern Munich have set a very impressive record, continuing their bolstering start to the season with an 8 consecutive win. Previously, Bayern Kaiserslautern and Mainz held the joint record of 7 consecutive wins. We have more on Bayern's extraordinary run of unbeaten games in this report.
They didn't just win, they absolutely thrashed Fortuna Düsseldorf by 5-0. The first one coming in the 28th minute. Ribéry teeing up Mario Mandzukic for an easy goal. And they were 2 up just 8 minutes later. A crazy deflection off the goalie here. Luis Gustavo was there to make the most of it. Into the second half, Ribéry and Philippe Lahm playing a bit of 1-2 with each other before the ball landed to Müller for 3-0. That's how it stayed until the last 4 minutes. Müller wasn't done yet because he struck again in the 86th minute. Fancy footwork from Luis Gustavo to set that one up. And I said it finished 5-0. They got the final goal just a minute later. Ribéry with some great work. Rafinha with the score. 5-0 it finished. Meanwhile, the champions Borussia Dortmund fell behind in the 14th minute of their match against ruler rival Schalke. Schalke's Dutch midfielder Ibrahim Afellay volleying in off the post to take the 1-0 lead. In the 48th minute, Schalke doubled their advantage when Marco Hurger ran from his own half and hit Lewis Holtby, who slot the ball past Borussia's goalie for a 2-0 lead. Dortmund got a consolation in the 55th minute off DeMarco Royce. Robert Lewandowski heading it in. But it was Schalke who...
Well, from sports, a reminder of our top stories before we go. Thousands of volunteers from the West Coast region turned up for harvesting at President Jammeh's farms in Kanilai. 16 young men have been freed from prison after they had their fines paid by the Islamic NGO Munazamat al-Dawa al-Islamiyah. Protesters in Lebanon have accused the Syrian regime of playing a part in the recent killing of a Lebanese intelligence chief. And the M23 rebels in the DRC have been reacting to the United Nations Security Council's report, which calls for Rwanda and Uganda not to help the notorious rebels. Well, that's all in this edition of the news. Thanks for your time and have a very good night.